let's talk about this face-off with Ilia. Now, to be able to fully appreciate that, you have to concede back to me in advance that you noticed the UFC, from a marketing standpoint, pushing the idea of Ilia, the global superstar. They pushed that harder than they pushed Ilia could be world champion. This is leading into the fight. After the fight, they continued to push the idea of Ilia, the global superstar, the comparison of Ilia to Conor, by example, harder than they pushed Ilia, the reigning lightweight champion. That was the angle that this was being looked at from, of which is accurate and wise. But we've got to understand that that was being pushed, and it's a big deal. If a champion ever calls for a fight, that fight happens. There are exceptions to what I just said, but I'd love for you to name one for me. And you probably can't do it. Now, you could if you thought long enough. You could if you could phone a friend. But it's so infrequently that I'm going to make the assumption you can't name it for me. Not right now. Not without a little time to process. Think about what I'm saying. If a champion calls for a fight, that fight happens. And I'm telling you, off the top of your head, to give me an exception. Now, if we're pushing the idea that Ilia is a global superstar, there's things that come with that. There's things that have to happen for you to go in that category. Undefeated is not a complete requirement, but something that resembles undefeated does. Whether maybe it's undefeated for the last 5 years. Maybe it's undefeated in the weight class. Maybe it's undefeated in the organization. There's an element that comes with it. Like there's a real fear and respect that transcends all culture when you hear the word unbeaten. For sure. A championship comes with the idea of being a global superstar. But you're never going to have a global superstar, and you've never had one in any sport ever that didn't have power. Now, power in the UFC only comes in the form of respect, where they will respect your wish. They will respect your request. I get that somebody doesn't actually have power, but they can have the perception of it. And it can even be a reality. I'll give you a great example, but you talk about a guy that was red hot and did everything right. Oh, he did everything right. Israel Adesanya. And one thing that Israel Adesanya would do every single night, before they faded to black and rolled the credits, he would let the world know who his next opponent was. And it was so powerful. After he says it to Joe Rogan, it's the last thought in everybody's mind. They throw to SportsCenter's what SportsCenter's talking about because Izzy made them talk about it. It happened 100% of the time. There is nobody I have ever seen steer their own career more than Izzy, and that was the element. That's how he got it done. That one thing is how he got it done. But guys, don't forget the night that he calls out Yoel Romero. Yoel Romero was coming off of a loss. Dana's like, I can't put you with Yoel. Not to mention, not only is he coming off a loss, he's an Olympic medalist out of Cuba. You're a skinny kickboxer out of New Zealand. It's a terrible matchup. And Izzy says, hey, Dana, I don't like this guy. I want to fight this guy. I got into the one line of work where if you don't like a coworker, you can fight him. I got into the one line of work where that's true. I did what I was supposed to do. And if I don't get to fight him, I'm being punished for my success. Dana goes, oh my goodness. Okay, I'll make the fight. But I'm just sharing with you the idea of Izzy and Izzy the superstar, which for sure he goes into that category. He had to have power. He had to have power, and he did. Conor McGregor would flaunt it. The only thing that Conor ever sold, people thought he was selling confidence and he was selling fights. No, man, it was all true. It was all true. He was as good as delivered. The only thing he sold, meaning pretended he had that he didn't have, was power. Tell these guys you're going to do nothing. We'll sit down. Me and Frank will sit down. We'll decide what's next. We'll see who I choose. Once a fight gets made that has nothing to do with him, he comes out and tells the world, I picked this guy. It's great. It was a great part of the gimmick, but to be a global superstar, you have to have it, which is why Conor added it. Conor's one of the great geniuses to have done this. I'm just bringing it to your attention that that was something that he did. That was an ingredient that he knew was important. And I want to tell you that because we can't have both at the same time. They are mutually exclusive. UFC superstar without power. It can't happen. The superstar must have power. And we've ran into a situation where Ilia has called out Paddy the Baddy. Exactly like Adesanya used to do, to say his name at the end of the night. Not to mention, he called out an undefeated guy. Paddy's not just some guy. He used to be kind of a guy with his weird haircut that was a regional talent. And it turned out he was a little better than we thought he was. Well, excuse me, he's been in the UFC for 3.5 years now. He's undefeated. He's not just some guy. He's an undefeated contender. That's a real call-out. That's one of the reasons that Izzy got away with the Yoel call-out, even if Yoel was coming off a loss. That's a straight-up killer. We don't usually go to a guy coming off a loss, but we could. And they did. But see, now we're being confronted with a resistance to that fight. And I don't know what direction they're going to go. I'm just here to watch what's happening, identify it, and tell it to you. Sarukian's argument is fantastic. Sarukian, by the numbers, he's ranked number 1. I don't know what Paddy's ranked. I would imagine he's 5 or 6. Could be as high as 4. But either way, I do know what Sarukian's ranked. He's ranked number 1. I do know Sarukian was the backup fighter, got on the scale, and could have fought one of these guys on Saturday for the world title. So you can't really come in and tell him he's not good enough or the right guy to fight for a world title, considering he almost did it 48 hours ago. Hell yes, Sarukian's the guy. It's a little hard to tell Sarukian that he's not a number 1 contender when he was in the weight class with Islam, had already fought Islam, and was getting ready to fight Islam again. And he hasn't lost a fight since then. So it's a little hard to make believe that he just lost that position. Though it is possible, though you can do it. You don't necessarily have to fight again to be knocked down. It goes 2 ways. There's another elevator that's going up. You could have a guy that had a fight and he moved up. But it's a difficult conversation to have. And there does seem to be a little bit of pushback to the idea of Paddy. We've never had a face-off. We've never had an organic face-off. Not one, not ever. Not one exception that you can give me where that fight wasn't then made. But there does appear that there is a resistance to making that fight. And that consideration, or what would you do instead, could only go to Sarukian, of which I would support and you would support, but it's a separate conversation. Right now, we're just trying to identify the point. Ilia cannot be a global superstar, as they're saying, and then have an organic face-off at the end of a pay-per-view, representing the first face-off at the end of a pay-per-view in history, where the fight the champion asks for does not get made.